why do you believe that digital communication, governance, and archiving is a space that is growing so quickly?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Farine, I do believe that, but I think my opinion doesn't matter. When I talk to people like Gartner, so Gartner, everyone knows Gartner, they're touching the whole industry. I met with them only a few weeks ago, and they shared with me a publicly available document, so it's on the internet. And they explained how right now DCGA is used by about 10% of the core of corporations. They believe in just 3 years' time that'll be about 25%. Now let's assume they're completely wrong. They double the estimate. Either way, you're looking at between a 1.5 and a 2.5x expansion in the market. So it's not just my opinion. There's a lot of evidence for that. So what's driving that, which I think is the real meat of your question? There's a lot of things driving that. So first and foremost, quite simply, we're still in the age of big data. We've got that explosion, and we see that in the volume of emails has not dropped off, right? There was a time when people thought, oh, well, email will drop off as, MySpace takes off, whatever. That hasn't happened, so that's not happening. There's more and more email, but there's more and more everything. There's so many channels now. And, a few years ago, again, you'd be thinking, oh, I want email and I want, would have been Skype, Teams today, and something else. No, today now it's like, I want 5 things. I mean, I would find it hard to imagine a customer with less than 5 forms of communication. So the first one is you've got this data explosion. The second thing is companies are realizing that they have an internal need. So while the primary users of the solutions that I'm involved with are, of course, compliance and legal and the IT will support them, internal audit are involved there because they're conducting investigations. Human resource are involved because they're interested in conduct, and they're conducting investigations. So there's more and more use cases, and we live in an age where there's mass information and there's also mass misinformation, and that happens at the big media political level, but it all happens in the company. The he said she said conversation. Whatever. You need to have an absolutely firm record that hasn't been tampered with, but you also need to have, some guys want to have the ability to use that to improve conduct. And that conduct might be how we treat each other, how we treat our customers, how we talk to customers, how we treat suppliers. There's any number of things. There's use cases already just on the archive of people using archiving to help improve how they manage their contracts. So they're able to go back and look at what was actually, does the contract match what was actually discussed before we do anything else? Was there, if I told you as a supplier, we'll give you that free, that's fine, that'll be 20% off you buy 1 million of those, and then that doesn't appear in the contract. Now you've got the record, you can check. So there's all this growing demand, there's all this need for a true record, and that's why the immutability, the worm nature is important. And then I say there's just a sheer volume, and it's out of control. So companies now have realized that you can't just manage it with essentially a backup solution. You need proper tools. And of course, the fact is, despite some of the shifts we see in sort of public sentiment, most people, and certainly the younger emerging workforce, they want to see better conduct. And the public are certainly fed up with bad conduct. So companies have to do their best and show they're doing their best to improve conduct and reduce conduct risk. And so again, these are the tools that help to enable that. These are the forefront of that sort of battle.
And would you say those are really the reasons for this investment into archiving, into e-discovery now that we didn't see before?
Well, I wouldn't say they're the only reason. So I mean, there are other very simple reasons. So for example, if you imagine you're with one of the very big software companies, provide your email and all your office software, productivity software. If you can pull out your legacy data that's not actively being used and put that away from there, one is that's a cost reduction. It's also, probably more importantly, it's an attack vector reduction. So in other words, if they get through your firewall and they get through your primary defenses, they can't get to the archive because that's actually just not there. So this also has other reasons. It certainly isn't a one or two dimensional thing like I described. I'm just saying they're probably the biggest single drivers. But there are financial reasons. There's the attainment. Again, a lot of companies want to have a strategy of cloud first, and achieving that requires the archive to be in the cloud. And there's still lots of archive providers that are on-prem. Yeah. I know that sounds very kind of 1990s, but it's true, right? So, and I don't know if I said to you before, Free, but about 80% of companies have a cloud first strategy. Yet only about 4% of companies have their archives in the cloud.
That's incredibly crazy.
Because it's the last thing to go, because it's the hardest, awkward, big, ugly thing. And so, we need to help companies achieve their IT strategies, because the IT strategies support their business strategies.
I mean, I remember a story back in probably 2019 or so of an archiving company that had 2 data centers on opposite sides of the same mountain, and there was an avalanche, and it was during Christmas. Both of them went down, as well as their service help desk. So yeah, not exactly the solution he wanted to be looking for.
No. And we don't like to talk too much about what we do with these things, but we keep 3 copies. They're all geographically dispersed, and there's a lot more resilience in that.